Space agencies are continuously looking for novel ideas to make space more accessible and more efficient. In just the last few years, we have seen new advances in propulsion systems, habitation modules, and life support systems, making it possible for us to explore farther and stay longer in space. Moreover, as private companies enter the race to develop new technologies for space exploration, we can only imagine what the future of space travel will hold. Stay until this video's end to learn about the evolution of space travel. Scientists have been considering the possibility of spaceflight for generations. Numerous experimental rocket launches into space were made in the 1940s, but none reached the intended altitudes. The Soviet Union launched the first uncrewed space mission on October 4, 1957. They successfully placed the Sputnik 1 spacecraft into orbit for 3 months after its launch. We will explore the evolution of space travel in this video. Please give this video a thumbs up and subscribe to this channel for more stuff before we continue. Click the bell icon to sign up for new video alerts. Have you already executed it? Let us move on. The National Aeronautics Space Administration was established as a new government organization to oversee American space exploration in 1958, NASA. The National Advisory Committee for Aeronautics, NACA, and several other research and military institutes, including the Army Ballistic Missile Agency, the Redstone Arsenal, and Huntsville, were all absorbed by NASA when it started operating in October 1958. The Soviet cosmonaut Yuri Gagarin became the first person to travel into space on April 12, 1961, after traveling for 108 minutes in a single circle of the planet. A little over 3 weeks later, NASA launched astronaut Alan Shepard on a suborbital trajectory, a trip that enters space but does not completely circle the Earth, rather than an orbital one. Shepard was in suborbital just for over 15 minutes. On May 25th, 3 weeks later, President John F. Kennedy issued a bold challenge to the country, saying, "I believe that this nation should commit itself to attain the goal before the decade is through of landing a man on the moon and returning him safely to Earth." NASA made headway in the 1960s toward President Kennedy's objective of setting foot on the moon with a program dubbed Project Gemini, in which astronauts evaluated both the equipment required for upcoming missions to the moon and their capacity to tolerate extended periods in space. Project Apollo, which sent humans to the moon's surface and into lunar orbit between 1968 and 1972, came after Project Gemini. The United States dispatched its first astronauts to the moon on Apollo 11 in 1969, and Neil Armstrong became the first person to set foot on the lunar surface. Astronauts took samples of lunar dust and rocks during the landed missions, which scientists are still analyzing to learn more about the moon. NASA also launched a series of spacecraft dubbed Mariner in the 1960s and 1970s to study Venus, Mars, and Mercury. From Chinese firecrackers to the reusable rockets that might send people to Mars, rockets have shaped history for ages. Over the years, rocket launch technology has changed significantly, and more exciting advancements are on the horizon. Rocket launch technology made its first significant advancement from solid to liquid fuel. Multi-stage launch techniques using liquid and solid fuel were the second major advancement. Reusable rockets that could be launched repeatedly were then developed. Future human space travel may be made possible by innovative new rocket launch technologies that will carry them far into the solar system. The development of rocket launch technology is evidence of the advancements in aerospace engineering. The future of rocketry can be predicted by understanding its past. When was the initial launch of a satellite? The first artificial satellite, Sputnik, was launched by the Soviet Union on October 4, 1957, startling the American public and ushering in the space age. Before the launch of Sputnik, many people had long aspirations of going into space. Although the US paid little attention to Konstantin Tsiolkovsky's efforts, he demonstrated mathematically in 1903 that an artificial satellite was possible. Over the ensuing decades, rocketry advanced, and the public's interest in space travel peaked. The International Geophysical Year was established in 1952 by the International Council of Scientific Unions. The IGY's duration was 18 months, from July 1957 to December 1958, because that was when solar activity would be at its peak. The year would include numerous scheduled scientific research and be somewhat of an extravaganza of a geophysical science. When was the first mammal to visit Mars? Fruit flies were the first animals to enter space after being launched in 1947 by the US on rockets built by captured Germans. 2 years later, a rhesus monkey named Albert II became the first mammal to travel to space. Both of these excursions, as well as all animal flights for roughly 10 years, were suborbital. Laika, a dog launched by the Soviet Union in 1957 and lost in orbit, became the first animal to orbit Earth. The crew of pets on the Soviet Sputnik 5 mission in 1960, commanded by the dogs Streka and Belka, became the first animals to orbit the planet and land without incident. When was the first person to travel into space? The first man in space was Yuri Gagarin of the Soviet Union. During the 108-minute session, his Vostok 1 vehicle circled the Earth at 27,400 kilometers per hour. A computer managed the re-entry of Vostok. Unlike their early US spaceflight projects, Gagarin did not land inside a capsule. Instead, he exited the spacecraft and descended to Earth using a parachute. The first person to travel into space was Yuri Alexeyevich Gagarin, a Soviet pilot and cosmonaut who lived from March 9, 1934 until March 27, 1968. On April 12, 1961, Gagarin made one orbit of the Earth in the Vostok 1 spacecraft. He received numerous decorations and honors, including the Hero of the Soviet Union, the highest honor bestowed by his country, for reaching this significant space race milestone. He also became an international celebrity. Gagarin was raised in the Russian settlement of Lyubursky and worked as a foundryman in his early years. He later enlisted in the Soviet Air Forces as a pilot. He was assigned to the Lustari Air Base, which lies close to the Norwegian border, before being chosen, along with 5 other cosmonauts, for the Soviet space program. After his space mission, Gagarin was appointed to the position of Deputy Training Director at the Cosmonaut Training Center, which was later given his name. In 1962, he was chosen to serve as a deputy in the Soviet Union and later in the Soviet of Nationalities, the lower and upper chambers of the Supreme Soviet respectively. Gagarin only flew once in orbit on Vostok 1. However, he was part of the backup crew for the Soyuz 1 mission, which ended tragically in a disaster and claimed the life of his friend and colleague, cosmonaut Vladimir Komarov. Soviet authorities forbade Gagarin from undertaking additional space missions because of concern that a national hero might be perished. He was once more permitted to fly normal aircraft after completing his training at the Zhukovsky Air Force Engineering Academy in February 1968. 5 weeks later, Gagarin perished in a training MiG-15 jet crash near the village of Kurzak while piloting it with flight instructor Vladimir Surygin. Current boundaries in spaceflight history. The idea of firsts in spaceflight is strongly related to the space race, but it also has a long history of firsts in aviation. The Soviet Union and the United States first raced to complete different accomplishments during the 1950s and 60s. The first artificial orbiting satellite, Sputnik 1, was launched by the Soviet Union in 1957. The first person to travel into space and orbit the Earth was the Soviet cosmonaut Yuri Gagarin in 1961. The first person to step foot on the moon was the American astronaut Neil Armstrong in 1969 during the Apollo 11 mission. Since the Apollo program ended in 1972, no person has been beyond low Earth orbit. In 2021, several global records in the field of spaceflight were broken. This contains the number of successful orbital launches and the number of orbital launch attempts every year. Additionally, records were broken in 2021 for the most people in space at once and the number of people in orbit. Future space travel proposals. Since the first moon landing 50 years ago, NASA has kept pushing the limits of knowledge to fulfill the promise of American creativity and leadership in space. Moreover, NASA will continue that work by going to the moon and sending astronauts there by 2024, landing on the lunar South Pole. In order to lead an innovative and sustainable program of exploration with commercial and international partners to enable human expansion across the solar system, NASA is carrying out the President's Space Policy Directive 1. Low Earth orbit is about to become commercially viable, according to NASA. Through these collaborations and experiences, NASA can return to the moon in 2024 and spend more time there. The largest rocket ever constructed, the Spruce Launch System (SLS), The Orion spacecraft and the Gateway Lunar Command Module are NASA's mainstays for deep space exploration. The Gateway Lunar Command Module orbiting the Moon will be used by NASA and its partners as a staging area for missions that will enable men to explore more of the lunar surface than ever before. Many commercial companies are attempting to improve space travel efficiency to lower the overall cost of space travel and subsequently, space colonization. With the introduction of the Falcon 9, a reusable rocket, SpaceX has assumed a strong position as the leader in this movement for effective exploration. By 2024, NASA's Artemis program hopes to send a second man and the first woman to the Moon. And by 2028, it hopes to have made space travel substantially possible. NASA's Artemis program is the first step towards its eventual objective of setting foot on Mars. Since its inauspicious beginnings, spaceflight has advanced significantly. Our ability to explore the universe beyond our globe has advanced dramatically from the earliest crewed rockets to the potent spacecraft of today. We expand the realm of possibility with every new generation of space technology by creating new opportunities for research and exploration. Who knows what spaceflight in the future will bring? In the years to come, we can only speculate about the fantastic places we will be able to go and the interesting things we will discover about the universe. Today's video has come to an end. If you liked this video, subscribe to the channel and give it a thumbs up. Remember to click the bell icon to get alerts when new videos are posted. I will see you in the upcoming video. Bye for now.